The simmering conflict between Hezbollah and Israel now at the forefront. And there's, of course, the growing violence between religious and ethnic groups inside Syria. This among also reports the Assad government is using increasingly brutal tactics, including the reports of using chemical weapons. Let's bring in Stephen Yates. He's a former deputy assistant to the vice president for national security affairs and currently the CEO of DC International Advisory. And Tom Peters is with us. He's a correspondent for the Christian Science Monitor. He just returned from Syria last week and has been traveling there over the last few months. So nice to have you both with us as we continue to explore this story where there are so many dynamics truly at play. Tom, I'd like to begin with you because you were just in Syria last week. What do you think our viewers need to know about what's actually happening on the inside?
I think the most important thing to understand is that it's getting worse and worse by the day. I first started going into Syria in late August, and the violence was bad, but now it's escalated to a point where not only are we worried about violence, but we're seeing a sharp rise in the level of extremist groups. You know, the Jabhat al-Nusra, which is the group that pledged allegiance to al-Qaeda recently. So we're seeing the opposition is really becoming much more extreme, and also the violence is just steadily ratcheting up, and now we have 8,000 refugees a day fleeing outside of the country. So it's really, the humanitarian situation is horrible, the violence is awful, and it's really, the situation is just rapidly deteriorating inside.
And Tom, just for some context for our viewers, this isn't the first dangerous place that you've traveled to. So tell us a little bit about your past experiences and how what you're seeing inside Syria compares to that.
Certainly, yeah. I've worked extensively in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I've never seen violence to this scale. Or it just where it affects so many people. Certainly in both Iraq and Afghanistan, civilians were affected and often killed or targeted by the violence. But inside Syria, you'll see oftentimes where it's just indiscriminate killing. You know, for example, last week I drove through a neighborhood that had been hit by a Scud missile, and it literally just levels an entire city block. There's nothing precise about these weapons that are being used, and we're just talking about widespread death and destruction that I haven't seen anything like this, certainly in my experience reporting, and I certainly think this is fairly unique in recent conflicts in terms of the destruction and loss of life we're seeing.
We're seeing some of the photos, actually, Tom, that you took on the inside, and the devastation, I mean, it is immense. I don't even know if there's words really to describe it. Stephen, just bringing you in on a little bit on this. You know, Tom gives us his observations from the inside. We've heard from officials here that there are no good options, but that's different than having no options. So, Stephen, what do you think about what Tom has to say and what policies we should be discussing when it comes to Syria?
Well, Tom's perspective is very important on this. The ground truth has been moving in a tragic direction for some time, and it sounds as if it's getting worse and worse by the day. It's true that we don't have good or easy options when it comes to Syria, but we also don't really have the luxury of sitting back and just letting the chips fall where they may. There's the risk of this broader sectarian conflict inflaming the region. There's the risk of, if we just sit back, some kind of a strike hits Israel, to whom we're treaty bound to support and defend. And our country just has not been prepared at all for what the president may think he may need to do should these kinds of worse scenarios spill over. Plus, there's the refugee traffic that has overwhelmed some areas of neighboring countries that may not be stable themselves very long if this endures.
And some of those countries, for example, Jordan, have been important to stability so far in the region. Tom, we talked somewhat about the refugees. This is a map of the region just for our viewers. Something that you reported really stood out to me about the humanitarian aid that Americans are providing inside of Syria. You said there's something very interesting going on about whether or not we're getting even some credit for providing the humanitarian aid. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's correct. The U.S. actually does provide, with a relative perspective to the other countries and organizations providing aid, the U.S. does provide a fair amount, but they've made the strategic decision not to brand their aid. And by brand, I mean to print an American flag or some kind of indication as to where it's come from. And they've decided not to do that, so it, groups that are receiving it or distributing it don't encounter problems that could endanger their safety should they be stopped at a checkpoint by a group that has kind of anti-American sentiment. So much of this aid that the U.S. is passing out there is done kind of covertly, or not covertly, but certainly without any advertising or fanfare. So the U.S. really doesn't get much credit for what it is doing there. But it still should be said that the aid that is being given does not come close to meeting the need that exists in Syria.
Besides the humanitarian aid, Stephen, if you were advising in your former role as you were about some of these national security affairs, what would be your next step?
Well, first, I would want very much to try to work closely with allies most closely affected by the situation there. I think we should be very hesitant about a U.S.-led role in the intervention. Just as Tom was referring to on the aid, any kind of military security, intelligence support, there will be sensitivities about an American presence. But Turkey, Jordan, people on the Arabian Peninsula, Israel, all of our allies that are around this area have profound interests. We should be coordinating and supporting what they can do to help shape events. What we've done to date has been minimal, really, by standards of in terms of changing the trajectory of where this conflict is going. It seems like it's getting stuck in a long-standing quagmire standoff, and I don't think our allies can sustain that alone.
I could have this conversation go a few hours with both of you. I really appreciate it. Stephen, your expertise, and Tom, your observations from the ground. We look forward to keeping in touch with you as you continue your travels in the weeks ahead. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, some major media